I think we have a lot of competition, so I think a lot of people say, oh gosh, our work, it's just this little rarefied corner of things. It's not out there in the mainstream. My sense is right now is the time that we all need to jump into that mainstream, so the challenge is going to be taking the jump and really putting ourselves out there. I mean, I think the profession, MSAT's really trying to support that with the website, and we're making a video to a really sort of neat animation to teach about the technique. I think we're poised, but I think for so long we've been this little corner of protection to keep the work pure and good, which it has, but now it is pure and good for the most part. It needs to be, people need to know about us. So I think that's part of it, is to really take a jump and get more public with this work. And the other one is just supporting ourselves. We don't charge enough. We don't charge medical prices. We don't get insurance coverage. How do we make it work financially? I really see young teachers up against that. I still play around with it. One of the things I've discovered recently is I'm now, to get people to come weekly instead of wanting to come every other week, I put them on half-hour lessons, which cost a little more than half of a regular lesson. And I find I'm making more money, even though people are coming for half hours, because they come more often. They're also successful because they don't dip in and out. So there are all these different ways to play with it. So making it financially viable, I think, is a big one. Those are the two, I think, in terms of the professional part.
What do you notice as the principal differences between those who are able to make a living at teaching the technique and those who give up and just give up?
And then there's also a third group, which are people who may, let's say you're a single parent and you also need another career to make enough money, and you also do this. There are people who do that. So there's also, they don't give up, but they're using this as a supplemental income rather than a primary income. I would say, to borrow one of F.M. Alexander's phrases, the right mental attitude. You just do it. You keep doing it. Yes, students drop out. Yes, people come for first lessons and they never come back. But you just keep going. And you will have successful students, and they will send other people. But you don't give up after 5. You keep going for years, and you build a practice. I once had a woman come, a colleague come. She was pretty newly trained. She came to my studio, and for the first 15 years or so, I kept pretty careful notes of every lesson, including drawings. I had this sort of grid that I did drawings on. It was just helpful. It helped me keep track of a lot of students and their progress. So one day before this woman came for her lesson, I was cleaning out my files, and when she walked in the door, I was holding in my hand a 4-inch stack of files of students who no longer came. So at this point I'd been teaching, 12 years, and I was just, pulling out the last 2 years' worth of people who dropped from my files to keep them current. And so there I stood with this big pile of things in my hands, and she walked in sort of worried that one of her students had just completed lessons, and now what was she going to do? And I know I can't hang on to my students, but this and that. And I said, close your eyes, hold out your hands. And I lay this stack in her hands, and I said, feel the weight of that? And she said, yes. I said, these are all my students that have quit this year. Just feel that. It's okay. It happens. So not to take that personally, and just to stay with the work.
Do you struggle with boredom teaching the same thing over and over again?
I think every teacher probably gets to a place where some things get a little stale and you find yourself getting repetitive. But actually, that stopped happening for me about 5 years ago. Something, when your ears pop. And I get so excited by each lesson now about what's available. Although I have a few students, maybe older people, who who just kind of come for maintenance. They don't really go surging forward, making all kinds of progress. That can be a little challenging. But for the most part, I find the work so exciting. I just can't, every time someone moves up, I can't believe it. It's such a magical thing. So there's sort of this sense of mystery. Walter writes a great little essay about forward and up. I think it's in The Act of Living. And how that's a mystery. What is forward and up? The head balance. And why does it release us and make us light? And the upshot of it is really to stay with the mystery of that. And to me, that keeps it from being boring.
How have you found the Alexander technique has affected your spiritual development?
Well, that's hard to sort out because of the guitar circle work that's so much about that. But actually, prior to that, Frank introduced our training course to the guitar craft courses. But then from 1990 to 2000, I really wasn't in touch with guitar craft at all. And then I went back, and since then it's been a big portion of my life. But in those 10 years, sometime around the middle of those 10 years, I had this sense that at a certain point in our being able to move up and maintain the up in our structures, this higher energy enters. I just had a sense of it. And that made me much more interested in spiritual development. What is the higher energy, and what is it for each of us? How do we define it? How do we organize it, our understanding of it? And so I would say that it sort of dawned on me first, and then in getting back into the work with Robert and also with Frank, that really helps me sustain it and work with other people within that context of these higher connections and these connections among people that one would call spiritual. I once had a student who was progressing really well, but she was a pronounced atheist, really a pronounced atheist. And I had this weird feeling that if she were to continue to take lessons, she was going to have trouble really keeping that ironclad atheism. So one night, she was coming for a lesson the next day. One night I lay awake. I really worried about it. I thought, I think it's coming soon, a place where she's going to start feeling a little more than she feels right now. And I don't know what to do. I don't know how, I was a pretty young teacher. I don't know what to do about that. And I got up the next day, and I had a message on my machine sometime that morning. She canceled her lesson that day, and she never came back. And that was kind of this weird reverse confirmation of my sense that this work is actually spiritual work. And at some level, if you don't want any spiritual experiences, you'd have to probably bag this to keep that not happening.
What is spirituality?
I think, and I'm going to draw on a man named J.G. Bennett, who was the person who ran Sherburne House. I think that when he would say, as Gurdjieff said, the three centers in the body, the moving center, the emotional center, and the mental center, those three capacities in a human being, physical, emotional, mental, when those three things are aligned and in some concord with each other, something new becomes possible. We can call it creativity, we can call it spirituality, we can call it, I think Thomas Merton calls it the divine indwelling. But something becomes available that's way beyond us, what any individual could actually muster as an individual. And I would say that's the closest I can get to defining something that's really not definable. You can get into theology. Different religions describe that and mythologize that in different ways. But sort of in its purest pragmatic form, I think it's the alignment